There are very few things scarier than the look that a mom gives you when you're messing up in public. Very few things as scary as that look. As a matter of fact, that look is enough to just like convict you of all your sins. Like if I was a mother, I could give you that look and we wouldn't need a sermon. We could just go straight to the communion, like we'd be good. It's that look that they give you. It's the tight-lipped look that they do. Like when you're embarrassing them in public. You guys know the look I'm talking. It's the one that's like, boy, I told you, don't, like one of those kind of looks. Nothing scarier than that look. When you get that look, you know you done messed up. You know immediately that you need to get your act together, like immediately in that moment. My mom hated when we would embarrass her. That's her thing. Don't embarrass me in public. Don't act like you got some home training when we're out in public. That's what she says. She had these kind of sayings, these sayings that she would say. And there are two places that you would never want to embarrass my mom, maybe your mom too. The store. You do not embarrass my mom in the store. And at church. Church is you do not embarrass your mother in church. You will get one of those looks with the quickness. And she always had this saying, don't embarrass me. But she always had this thing that she would always say. She'd always say, and it serves as kind of the launching pad for our discussion today. She'd always say, don't get it twisted. I am not one of your little... Your mom and my mom are the same person, is what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. I am not one of your little friends. Now, the thing is, I never confused her to be one of my friends. I don't know why they have to be little. Those are things why are we insulting? It's just, they're regular-sized people. I never thought she was one of my little friends. But for my mom, she felt the need to clarify every now and again who she is. She felt the need to make sure I was absolutely clear about who she was, who she is. My mom felt the need to make sure I never got it twisted. And I wonder every now and again how many things we get twisted about God. I wonder how many things we lose sight of about God and about who He really is. I wonder how many times we forget how Jesus really works. I wonder if Jesus would ever say to us, don't get it twisted. If He would call out the things in our lives that we kind of have twisted, the things that we have mistaken Him on. I love communion because communion is a reminder about who God really is. Communion is God's way of screaming out to His church by saying, don't get it twisted. Don't lose sight of who I am. Don't forget what I am all about. What God has been saying to me this week as I've been preparing is that I don't want you to miss my message of love. I don't want you to twist the message and the love that I have for you around based on the things that's happening in this world. I think we all need a reminder every now and again not to get things twisted about God. And the Bible tells us that God introduced communion in order to clarify exactly what He's all about. That He's saying to you and He's saying to me, don't get it twisted. And if you want to know what Jesus is all about, if you want to understand who Jesus truly is, then you have to look no further than the people that He eats with. Jesus is sitting at a table in Luke chapter 22 with 12 of His closest friends. We call them the disciples. He's sitting there at the table and He says, I have fervently desired to have this meal with you. I have been longing, I have been desiring to have this meal with you today. So He takes the bread and He breaks it. He takes the wine and he hands it out. And He says, do this in remembrance of me. In other words, what Jesus is trying to say is that if you need clarity on who I am, if you need to understand what I'm all about, look no further than this meal that we are having. Look no further than the communion table if you want to fully understand what I am all about. So he sits down and he has a meal with them. Now, this isn't the first time Jesus has used a meal time to clarify who he is. The Bible tells us in our story today that Jesus is having a meal with tax collectors and sinners. He's having a meal with individuals who the Jewish community would have determined were unclean. Jesus is sitting around, he's received them, and now he is eating with unclean individuals. He is breaking bread, he's reaching into the same pot, he's sharing utensils with unclean individuals. So, of course, he is communing with them. So, of course, the scribes and the Pharisees come by and they see Jesus having this meal with unclean people, and they begin to judge him precisely because these individuals are unclean. Now, to be unclean means that they have not asked for forgiveness. To be unclean means that they are not repentant whatsoever about their sins. And yet Jesus takes time to sit down and have a meal with individuals that church people would not have had a meal with. He sits there and he has a meal with them. And as he's eating and he's communing with them, he's having a communion of sorts with them. I imagine that Jesus is saying, you think that these people are unseemly? You think these people are unsightly? You think that these individuals are unbecoming? You think that they're unacceptable and uncouth? But these are the exact people that I am looking to have a meal with. Jesus says, don't get it twisted. I'm trying to show you what communion is all about. And here's the very first point that I want to bring to your attention. Communion is a reminder that Jesus is still in the business of eating with sinners. But it gets even better in our text today, because the scribes and the Pharisees are judging Jesus for eating with these sinners. So Jesus, in the presence of the scribes, the Pharisees, and the host of sinners there, Jesus says, let me clarify some things by telling you a story. He says, once upon a time, there was a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and one wandered away. Stop right there. Jesus is saying that there was a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and 99 stayed, but one roamed away. Now, you've got to understand that in that time, being a shepherd was an unclean occupation, which means that this shepherd in the story is just as unclean as the sinners and is just as unclean as the tax collector that they were judging him for being around in the first place. And I think that Jesus is trying to say this: don't get it twisted. Not only do I eat with unclean people, I identify with unclean people. As a matter of fact, I will be an unclean person in today's story just to prove the point that not only am I still in the business of eating with unclean people, I am in the business of using unclean people. And is there anybody in here today who is glad, who is thankful that God is still in the business of using unclean individuals? Oh, I thought I'd have a little bit more of a witness here on the front row from our deacons and our deaconesses who know that I didn't always wear these white gloves. People on our praise team says, I didn't always sing for Jesus. I didn't always do the things that I'm doing now for God, but God is still in the business of using unclean people. I can stand as a witness that I'm an unclean person, and God is still in the business. He's still interested in using me. And as we take communion today, it is a reminder that Jesus is still in the business of using and eating with unclean individuals. I imagine that Jesus would continue his story. He'd say, once upon a time, there was a shepherd who had 100 sheep, and one of those sheep wandered away. So he left the 99 in search of the one. The Bible says that this shepherd leaves the 99 sheep in order to go after the one sheep that was lost. The shepherd is more concerned about the wayward one than the righteous 99. Jesus is trying to teach church people something here. He's trying to help us to understand that God is the God of the one before he is the God of the 99. Jesus is primarily concerned he is not primarily concerned about the majority. He's not primarily concerned about vote counts, about crowd opinions, about bottom lines. Jesus doesn't seem to be worried or concerned about the majority at all. God, doesn't seem to be primarily concerned with the 99. He's primarily concerned with the one. Jesus isn't a capitalist, because a capitalist would have looked at his 99 sheep and he would have looked at his one who's wandered away, and he would have done a cost-benefit analysis and determined that it didn't make sense for him to go after the one and risk the 99. Jesus isn't a consensus seeker, because it would have taken a 2/3 majority vote from the 99 sheep that stayed to give Jesus permission to go after the one. Jesus isn't a utilitarian, because utilitarianism dictates that majority rules. What's best for the majority is what we do. And Jesus doesn't seem to be interested or concerned about what the majority wants. All he cares about is going after the one. Jesus' singular rule is, I must go and seek and save that which has been lost. No matter if anyone comes with me, no matter if anyone goes my way or likes what I am doing, I am going to get the lost one no matter what. And I wish that the church would take this seriously. Because how many fewer arguments would we have over our preferences if we were primarily concerned with calibrating our services to fit those who are out there rather than trying to keep everyone in here happy? How different would the church look if we allocated resources according to getting people who are out there into church rather than keeping everyone in here satisfied? What would be different in our church if we were actually concerned with the one rather than the 99? Things would be very different. I told myself that I wasn't going to mention this, but if your social media looks anything like my social media this past week, then most people have been having a conversation about Kanye West. They've been talking about his album and what's going on in his everyday life. And the thing that concerns me, if you don't know, Kanye West has decided to be a born-again Christian as of late. He says that he's not going to make any more secular music. He released a Christian hip-hop album. And people are concerned, not so much because he has become a Christian, but because of his actions outside of the terms of being a Christian. Because the same Kanye West who's decided that he's going to be a Christian seems to also be the Kanye West who sides with racist power in our world today. And it just seems to be kind of a mismatch between being a born-again Christian and being anti-black, being anti-immigrant, being on the side of political power that seeks to marginalize individuals. And the reason why I touch on this today is because it seems as though Kanye's Christianity falls in line with mainstream Christianity at large. And what this story is doing is it's trying to recalibrate us to help us to understand that God is not primarily concerned with making the powerful more powerful. Christianity, according to Jesus, is actually seeking to make Christianity more focused on the marginalized in our society. Imagine if our church was concerned about racism in our world. Imagine if our church was willing to vote in the direction of anti-racist policy. Imagine if we weren't concerned about keeping gay people out of the church and were instead interested in meeting people where they are. How would the church be different if we truly took it serious that God is the God of the one before he is the God of the 99. So here it is. Here's what this reminds us of. Communion is a reminder that this might not be for you. If you aren't interested in being up, see what Jesus does as the shepherd is he leaves the 99 to go out and get the one. But I believe what he's looking for today is a church, a 99 that's willing to leave the comforts of where they are to go and find the one. And if you aren't interested in going to find the one, this might not be for you. But the tension that we must deal with here in our story today is the recklessness of it all. It does feel a bit reckless for the shepherd to leave the 99 behind in order to go and get the one. Why would a shepherd compromise his shepherding operation? Why would you leave 99 sheep in order to go get one sheep? Why would you risk it all for one? Well, the answer is simple, and here it is. It's because it's his sheep. You might miss the power of this reality if you don't see what Jesus is doing here. Jesus is telling three parables back to back to back. The first parable is the parable of the lost sheep. The second parable is the parable of the lost coin. The third parable is the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. What Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to set up in all three stories there is something that is lost. There is a lost sheep, but that sheep belongs to the shepherd. There is a lost coin, but that coin belongs to the woman. There is a lost son, but that son belongs to the father. Jesus is trying to set up some tension in the story here because in each story something is lost, but they have something else as well. So you lose one sheep, but you have 99 others. The father loses one son, but he has another son. The woman loses one coin, but she has 9 other coins. So she has more than enough. Losing one shouldn't matter. And Jesus is trying to create a bit of tension where the characters really shouldn't be worried about the lost one. They should cut their losses and move on. But Jesus is trying to help us to understand two things in this story. The first is it doesn't matter if I have other ones. I want you. And the second thing that he's trying to help us to understand is that your mistakes don't get the final word. The mistake is that the sheep is lost. It wandered away. That's the mistake. But the final word is that the shepherd found it. The mistake is that the coin is lost. But the final word is that the woman found it. The mistake is that the son has walked away, but the final word is that the father runs out to meet him and embraces him. You see, the shepherd realizes that if he doesn't go, if I don't go to find my lost sheep, this sheep will never find its way home. If I don't take the risk to go out and find him, it will never find its way back home. It will be lost forever. The shepherd understands that there is no scenario in which this sheep wanders away and then finds a way to wander back home. That just doesn't happen. The only way for the sheep, the only way for you and for me to come back home is for the shepherd to come and find us. And here's the point. Communion is a reminder that Jesus won't allow your mistakes to be the final word. He won't allow the mistakes that you have made to be the final word in your story. How do I know? It's right here in the text. If you could put it on the screen, Luke 15 and verse 5. I know I didn't tell you to do that before, but could you just, there you go. Luke 15 and verse 5. It says, and what? And when he has found it. Jesus decides to use the word when. Not if, not maybe, not perhaps. When he finds this lost sheep, he lays it on his shoulders and he walks home with it. Can you see this scene in your mind's eye? This sheep is out lost. It's been wandering away for quite some time. It's caught, it's gone, and it's out. It doesn't know where it is. And yet the good shepherd finds his way to the sheep, picks him up, and places him on his shoulders. And as he walks back to his village with this sheep on his shoulders for miles and miles and miles, I imagine he is telling this sheep, I can't wait to get home. Because when we get home, there will be a celebration of epic proportion because that which was lost has now been found. And as the shepherd comes into the village with the sheep on his shoulders, I imagine people see him from a long ways off and they begin to celebrate. They don't ask, is this sheep ever going to leave again? They don't ask if this sheep is ever going to fall away again. No, they just see the sheep on the shoulders of the shepherd and they begin to celebrate with everything that they have because that which was lost has now been found. All they know is that we have a reason to celebrate. But there is a greater celebration. There is a greater celebration that I believe happens in our lives. I think that this area knows a thing or two about celebration right now. We know something about celebration because hundreds of thousands of people are lining Constitution Avenue in D.C. To celebrate the World Series champions, Washington Nationals. They are celebrating them they are lining up as we speak, and they are celebrating. They don't know what's going to happen next season. They don't care about all the times that the Nationals lost games this last season. All they know is that they have a reason to celebrate right now. There is indeed a greater celebration coming. For the Bible tells us that there was another lamb named Jesus Christ himself. And this lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. The Bible tells us that Jesus died up on a cross, was buried in a tomb, and rose from the grave. And that's good news, but it gets even better because the Bible tells us that he then ascends to heaven. And on his way to heaven, the Bible tells us that all of heaven is waiting with bated breath, waiting with anticipation to see if Jesus was able to find that which was lost. They are waiting in anticipation. And I imagine as the good shepherd enters into heaven with the world that he just saved on his shoulders, there is a celebration that breaks out. The Bible actually tells us exactly what happens in Revelation chapter 5, verse 11. It says, "Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and living creatures, and elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, 'Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessings.'" Now, if the people in D.C. can stand up on their feet and start to celebrate the victory of the Washington Nationals, what is stopping you from getting up on your feet and celebrating Jesus Christ and all that he has done for you? If you believe that Jesus' blood still works, then there is a celebration in heaven precisely because one person came to repentance. We have more than a reason. We have more than enough reason to be thankful to God for what he has done for us. We have more than enough reason to celebrate the goodness of our God, because when you partake in communion, you honor the blood that was sacrificed on our behalf. And the Bible tells us that all of heaven begins to celebrate all over again. Communion triggers a celebration in heaven. So as you partake in communion today, don't get it twisted. This is what Jesus is all about.